I always believed my family was ordinary. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. At least, that's how it seemed, until my younger brother, Daniel, was born. It happened on a freezing November night. I was jolted awake by the sound of hurried footsteps and my Aunt Marion's panicked voice. "Elliot, get dressed. Your mom is in the hospital." I was too young to understand the weight of those words. Hospitals meant accidents, sickness, things kids don't want to think about. But what followed wasn't just about a medical emergency. It was the beginning of my disappearance from my own family. Daniel arrived early, too early. Nearly 2 months premature. My parents' once relaxed demeanor transformed into a permanent state of anxiety. Every conversation revolved around his health, his needs, his future. The house itself changed, disinfectants lined every surface, the air carried the sharp, sterile scent of hospital-grade sanitizer, and the once lively home became a place of hushed voices and careful movements. At first, I thought it was temporary. I told myself things would go back to normal once Daniel grew stronger. But normal never returned. The slightest sniffle on my part got me sent to Aunt Marion's house, away from my own bed, my own family. My mother barely acknowledged my presence unless it was to issue warnings. "Don't touch that. Don't come near Daniel." I tried everything to earn back their attention. I aced my tests, nothing. Won a regional art competition, barely a nod. But when Daniel babbled his first word, the entire family erupted in celebration. That was when I understood, no matter what I did, I would never matter as much as he did. Daniel quickly learned how to wield that power. A slight headache meant skipping school. A hint of fatigue got him out of chores. I, on the other hand, had to fend for myself. If I had a fever, I was told to sleep it off. If I needed help with school, I had to figure it out alone. But I adapted. If no one would applaud me, I'd clap for myself. If no one would help me succeed, I'd carve my own path. And I did. The only person who truly saw me was my grandmother, Evelyn. Every time I was sent away, she welcomed me into her quiet world. Her passion was antiques, specifically rare books and old manuscripts. She taught me how to recognize valuable first editions, how to spot a rare binding, how to appraise a book not just by its cover, but by its history. It fascinated me. I spent hours in her cozy study, surrounded by bookshelves that reached the ceiling, each shelf packed with treasures. The scent of old parchment, ink, and aged leather bindings became my comfort. Evelyn would place a book in my hands, explaining its origin, showing me the delicate art of turning a fragile page without damaging it. And it became my escape. By the time I turned 18, I knew I had to leave. I secured a full scholarship to a university across the country. My parents barely reacted to my acceptance letter. "That's so far away," my mother said. "Daniel will miss you." When I packed my bags and left, not a single family member came to see me off. I buried myself in my studies, majoring in rare book preservation. I worked part-time at an auction house, spending hours cataloging dusty manuscripts, learning from experts, sharpening my skills. I learned to identify forgeries, track provenance, and understand the nuances of historical printing techniques. I found solace in the world of books, where value was determined by knowledge and patience, not by birthright. Then one day, I made a discovery that changed everything. A book, dismissed as worthless, landed on my desk. Something about it didn't sit right. The paper felt too old, the binding too intricate. I researched obsessively, cross-referencing archives, verifying the publisher's marks. And I was right. It was a lost edition of a 16th century manuscript. Its estimated value? Nearly $200,000. My boss was stunned. That moment cemented my reputation. Soon, high-profile collectors sought my expertise. My commissions grew. My name circulated among the elite. Within a few years, I had built something remarkable, my own firm, specializing in rare book authentication. I was no longer invisible. And my family had no idea. Then came Thanksgiving. The night everything fell apart. My mother called me 2 weeks before. "Elliot, my back isn't what it used to be. Cooking a big dinner is too much for me." I had a major appraisal coming up, but I knew declining would only confirm their belief that I was the selfish, distant son. So I said, "I'll handle it." I hired a private chef. The meal was flawless: gourmet turkey, homemade stuffing, cranberry sauce infused with spices. But of course, Daniel found something to complain about. "You ordered takeout?" he sneered, shoving a fork into his plate. "Seriously?" I dipped back my frustration. This was coming from a guy who once set his microwave on fire making popcorn. The evening dragged on. My mother beamed as Daniel bragged about his grueling internship at a marketing firm. My father nodded along, his pride evident. Meanwhile, I sat silently, knowing I had finalized a 7-figure appraisal deal that morning. After dinner, I stepped away to check an auction. Lost in my laptop screen, I didn't hear the door open. "Hey, do you have a charger?" I turned. Daniel was already peering over my shoulder. His eyes widened. On my screen, my financial dashboard. A balance well into the 8 figures. He stumbled back, eyes darting between me and the numbers. "What the hell is this?" Before I could react, he bolted downstairs, shouting, "Elliot's loaded. He has millions." Silence. Then my mother's trembling voice, "You have what?" I walked into the dining room. Every face turned to me, wide-eyed, expectant. I took a slow breath. For the past 2 years, I'd been anonymously sending you $5,000 a month to cover expenses. But Daniel took the credit, didn't he? The room fell eerily quiet. My mother turned to Daniel, her face pale. He sputtered, searching for words, but I didn't care anymore. I picked up my coat and laptop. "No more. I owe you nothing." My mother gasped. "We're your family." I walked to the door, turned back once. "Then maybe you should have acted like it." I left, finally free. And I never looked back.